enjoy your ruin.
I always thought my children were my rocks, my solid ground. I relied on them, trusted them more than anyone. I raised them, fed them, stayed up at night near the fire with them when the world seemed dark. But here's the surprise. Everything I fed them was empty. All the love, all the care. It turned out to be nothing more than a facade. I remember it clearly. Early summer when my son Reggie promised me we'd go to the lake. I'd been dreaming of such moments for years. Time together, just him and me before I grew older, before I started to feel the heaviness of years I hadn't planned on living. He said he wanted to spend time with me, that he didn't want me to feel lonely as I aged. I believed him as I always had. Even when something felt off, even when I could feel that pull of doubt deep in my bones. I pushed it away because a mother believes in her son, right? And so I did. That morning I had breakfast, dressed in my favorite jacket, the one I bought on my anniversary with James. My heart fluttered a little as I imagined us at the lake, breathing in the fresh air, the sun on my face. Nothing fancy, just a simple day. It was supposed to be our day. I waited for Reggie by the door, excited, ready. But he didn't show. The doorbell rang, but it wasn't him. It was just a delivery man, another huge box for my son. I tried not to think too much about it, but as the hours passed, I understood. He wasn't coming. Not today, not ever. By lunch, I realized it wasn't just a delay. He had forgotten. Or maybe he didn't care. The feeling of betrayal wrapped around me, thick and heavy. But it didn't end there. Later that evening I checked my bank account. My heart sank as I stared at the numbers on the screen. Everything I had worked for, everything I'd saved was gone. Vanished. My savings gone. My insurance payout gone too. I tried to call the bank, but when they answered, the voice on the other end told me something that froze me in place. Your son, Mr. Reggie Shaw, changed the password and withdrew all your funds. That was the first knife. The second came when I called the insurance company. My critical recovery payout, $18,000, was processed last week, the representative said. I didn't know what to do with that information. I didn't even remember filing for it. But there it was. My son had filed a claim in my name, and the money had gone to him. All of it. That's when I stopped shaking. Not because the fear was gone, but because the fury had arrived. Reggie didn't just steal money. He took my dignity. He took my future. He took my trust. And I wasn't going to let him get away with it. A few days passed, and one thing became clear to me. I couldn't just sit and wait anymore. Reggie thought I'd be too tired, too old, too scared to act. He thought he could leave me with this situation, thinking I'd be too frightened to do anything. But I wasn't going to wait for his phone calls or hope for his non-existent apologies. No, I decided to take action. I sat in the kitchen as I always did, but there was no comfort this time. My hands trembled, but not from weakness. They trembled from something else, something new. Determination. The anger, the frustration, all of it mixed into a single burning resolve. The first thing I did was call the bank to make sure my son hadn't withdrawn any more money from my account. I couldn't believe what he'd already taken, but I needed to be sure. Then I reached out to Sonia. She had been one of my brightest students, and now she was a lawyer. I knew I could count on her. Sonia never hesitated, never asked too many questions. She just listened, and she was quick. We made an appointment for the next day. When I walked into her office, I sat across from her. She looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. A fire. She knew I wasn't here just for my money back. No, I wanted something more. I wanted Reggie to realize what he had done, and I wanted him to pay for it. We'll start by freezing the accounts, she said as she opened her computer. Tomorrow we'll file a motion to freeze all your remaining assets. And we'll file a lawsuit. This isn't just about getting your money back. This is a fraud case. He nodded. It was going to be hard, but we had to move quickly. Sonia worked fast, collecting the necessary documents and pulling up every transaction connected to my name. The more I saw, the more my blood boiled. Reggie didn't just take money. He created a fake business under my name, opened an account and funneled my money into it. He forged my signature, changed addresses. He did it all, thinking I wouldn't notice. But he was wrong. When we had all the evidence, I knew what I had to do. I wanted him to think he'd gotten away with it. I wanted him to feel safe, to believe he had won. Because when the time came, it wouldn't just be about money. It would be about making him feel it. Feel every choice he made, every lie he told. Called him. His voice came through the phone, carefree, as if nothing had happened. "Hey Ma, just checking in. You good?" Kept my voice calm, sweet even. "Oh, I'm doing okay. Just taking it easy, nothing special." "Good, good," he said. "Candace and I are thinking of starting a business. Something wellness-focused, you know. Helping people get their lives on track." I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I kept it together. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "That sounds wonderful, baby. Just be careful who you trust." He laughed, the same old laugh, the one that used to fill the house when he was a boy. He didn't suspect a thing. I wasn't angry, not then. No, I was waiting. Waiting for the moment when everything would be set in motion. And when that moment came, he wouldn't be prepared. He'd never expect it. After hanging up, I felt a strange peace. Not because I was happy, but because I was in control. I had a plan. And the wheels were already in motion. Reggie didn't know it yet, but he was about to pay for everything he had taken from me. I wasn't just a victim. I was the one who would bring this all to light. I would take back what was mine and show him that no one, especially not family, could take me for granted again. A few days passed since my last conversation with Reggie, and I felt the weight of it all more than ever. There was no longer any hope in waiting for him to realize his mistake. No longer any use in hoping for an apology that would never come. No, I couldn't stand being in his shadow any longer. He needed to understand that there were boundaries you couldn't cross. I was ready to become the woman he never thought I could be. Strong, resolute, and capable of not just protecting my rights, but reclaiming my dignity. And this time I wasn't going to forgive. All the years I spent raising Reggie, all the sacrifices I made, the last bit of money I gave him when he needed it, the late-night prayers for his future, all of that suddenly felt so meaningless. He never understood how deeply I loved him. How much I gave to make sure he was happy. How I put his interests before mine, even when it felt like too heavy a burden to bear. But none of that mattered to him. No, what he wanted was money. He saw me not as a mother, but as another source of income, a temporary resource to exploit without consequence. But that all changed now. The first step was to protect myself. I couldn't leave everything up to chance, so I called Sonia. She was the one person I knew I could trust. She had been one of my brightest students many years ago, and now she was an accomplished lawyer. She remembered the lessons I had taught her, and now it was my turn to ask for her help. We met at her office. I sat across from her and I told her everything. Sonia listened silently, jotting down every detail. Her face gradually hardening as she realized the scope of my son's treachery. I saw the fire in her eyes. She understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about money. This was about justice. Sonia wasted no time. She reached out to the bank and began organizing everything to freeze the accounts Reggie had emptied. We needed to stop him from taking any more. By the following day, we had already started the process. I no longer sat idle, waiting for the inevitable. Sonia had access to my financial records, and soon, the full extent of Reggie's betrayal came into focus. It turned out my son had opened a fraudulent business under my name, Shaw Wellness Consulting. Using my personal details, he applied for a business bank account. All the transfers he made from my accounts had been funneled into this account. The audacity of it all. Instead of helping me in my old age, he drained every penny I had saved and funneled it into a business with no profit for me. Sonia and I worked tirelessly, collecting evidence. Each transaction, each fraudulent document, was crucial in proving my case. Sonia examined every withdrawal, every check that had been cashed in my name. And the more I saw, the clearer it became. Reggie didn't just take a few $1,000s. He created an entire scheme of fraud, planning to continue stealing from me as long as he could. I kept telling myself to stay calm, to hold it together. But each time I looked at the documents, I was reminded of the times when we were together, when I held his hand, when I cheered for him in school, when I prayed for his future. Now he had thrown me aside. My anger mixed with pain, but I wouldn't let myself fall apart. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming my strength. The following week, Sonia didn't stop for a second. She filed a request to freeze all of Reggie's accounts connected to the fraudulent business. Within a few days, she informed me that the bank had confirmed the accounts were frozen, and all transactions were halted. He couldn't take another cent. That, to me, was my first real victory. The next step was filing a lawsuit. We took action against Reggie for fraud, and Sonia began working with the bank and insurance companies to recover the stolen funds and file for restitution. I began to feel real power surge through me. I was ready to fight, and now no one could stop me. I knew this would be more than just a courtroom battle. This was about restoring my dignity. This was about standing up for myself, showing Reggie that I was no longer the woman he thought he could walk all over. I was done being the one who made sacrifices and kept quiet. Now I was the one calling the shots. By now, Sonia had all the information we needed. The paperwork was ready, the evidence was solid. The lawsuit was filed, and we were waiting for the next steps. Every day, it felt like I was inching closer to a resolution, and with every piece of evidence we gathered, the more my resolve hardened. Reggie was going to learn what happens when you betray the wrong person. But I wasn't done with him yet. I decided to give him one final chance to feel like he'd won, to believe that I was still too weak to stand up to him. Called him. He answered the phone without hesitation, as though nothing had changed. "Hey Ma, how are you doing?" I kept my voice sweet, calm and distant. "Oh, I'm doing fine. Just resting, nothing special." "That's good," he said. "Candace and I are thinking of starting a business. Something wellness-focused, helping people get their lives back on track." I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I replied with a smile in my voice. "Sounds wonderful, baby. Just be careful who you trust." He chuckled, not suspecting a thing. I had him right where I wanted him, completely at ease, thinking I was still the old woman who couldn't do anything. After the conversation ended, I felt a strange peace. Not because I was happy, but because I knew I had everything in place now. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to let him off the hook. The battle had begun, and Reggie had no idea what was coming next. Weeks passed, and I could feel the world around me shifting. Sonia had been doing her job, and slowly, I began to feel the weight of the process working in my favor. Though I had not yet gotten my money back, I knew the victory was on the horizon. Everything I had done so far, every document, every check with the bank, every phone call to legal authorities, was part of something far greater than just retrieving what was stolen. It was my return to life. Sonia handled the case with the professionalism I had always known her for. She submitted requests to various organizations, confirmed the forged documents, and even dug into the fake business Reggie had set up under my name. It was all unfolding, one step at a time, and soon, I began receiving official confirmations from the banks that all accounts linked to his fraudulent actions were frozen. Yet, in that moment, I realized the true battle was still ahead of me. Reggie wasn't the type to sit idly by, waiting for everything to crumble. He was crafty, and I knew I couldn't underestimate him. So, I decided it was time to let him understand. I wouldn't just wait for reimbursement. I was going to take active steps. I knew the next move would hurt him, but it didn't scare me. Sonia was planning to file the lawsuit, and I decided it would be more than just a suit for money. This would be a lawsuit for everything he had done to me. How he had disrespected my feelings, how he had betrayed me. How could he, my own son, go so far for money? He hadn't just deceived me. He had left me alone in the hospital when I needed him most, and while I lay there recovering, he was draining the life savings I had spent my whole life earning. No, I wouldn't remain silent anymore. I didn't know how it would end, but I knew I was on the right path. And then I got that phone call that would change everything. The silence broken. One morning Sonia called me. Her voice was clear and calm, but I could feel something big was unfolding. "We found another major mistake," she said. "Reggie signed forged documents in your name to get a loan under your address. His business, which he created under your name, is also listed as a debtor. You're not just trying to get your money back anymore, Miss Shaw. You now have every reason to demand full compensation for everything he's done." I could feel the weight of her words settle in my chest. I had always known it wasn't just about money. Now it was clear. It was an entire operation designed to exploit me. I was certain now that Reggie wouldn't apologize and he wouldn't return the money without consequences. Sonia worked quickly. She gathered all the documents from the bank, the insurance company, and the credit institutions, confirming that Reggie had created false records, even entering into contracts using my information. Everything pointed to one thing. He was committing systematic fraud. And what struck me the hardest was how nonchalantly he signed every one of those fraudulent documents. But I knew. He would answer for every signature. The meeting that would change everything. That same day, Sonia arranged a meeting with the prosecutor. We went together. And I knew this was the moment when everything would begin to come to light. I sat in the prosecutor's office as we went through every detail of the case. Sonia had already prepared the lawsuit, and everything was ready to be filed. The prosecutor looked at me, and I felt the gravity of the moment. My hands were holding not just papers but my future. "Do you understand, Miss Shaw, that this is a very serious matter?" he asked. I nodded, looking him straight in the eyes. He was right. It was serious, but I couldn't sit around anymore, waiting for Reggie to decide when it would be too late for me. At the meeting, the prosecutor mentioned that the case had gained public attention and had brought focus to the issue of fraud against elderly people. My fight wasn't just for my money anymore. It had grown into something bigger. I was fighting so that others wouldn't fall victim to the same betrayal, so that Reggie couldn't hurt anyone else as he had hurt me. The beginning of the end. A few days later, Sonia called again. She told me that we had new information. The case would have a hearing in court. Reggie was going to stand before a judge, and everything pointed to the fact that he would be convicted for fraud. We waited for that day, and I felt how each day brought me closer to real justice. I sat at home, listening intently to every phone call, preparing myself for the big moment. I was no longer the one who waited for others to decide my fate. Now I was confident in myself, and nothing could stop me. I wouldn't let Reggie build his life on my back anymore. Now I would stand firm on my own 2 feet. The moment of truth had arrived, and I was ready. With each passing day leading up to the trial, I could feel justice creeping up on me, like a shadow I could no longer ignore. This was the moment I had been working toward all these years, the moment when I stopped being just the woman who waited for help and became the one who controlled her own fate. My fight was no longer about money or getting back what was lost. It was about my dignity and my right to respect. For every day I had spent raising them, for every ounce of myself I gave, for every sacrifice, it was time to reclaim what was mine. I could no longer remain silent. Each day leading up to the court case felt heavy. I couldn't close my eyes to what was happening inside me. My relationship with Reggie was already shattered, but this time I didn't mourn him. The son I had raised had become a stranger to me, and that wasn't my fault. It was his choice, and he would answer for it. My strength now lay in my decisiveness. I wouldn't allow anyone to strip away my dignity anymore. Sonia continued to work with the prosecutor. All the paperwork had been submitted, and the case was now under review. But what worried me most was one thing. Reggie didn't know I was ready to follow through with this journey to the end. He was starting to feel my persistence, and he hadn't yet seen me as strong as I was becoming. The day I learned that the court hearing was set for 2 weeks from now, I felt my resolve strengthen. All those years I had put my dreams on hold, trying to do everything for him and the family, had been preparation for this moment. Now it was time for me. This was my moment to show that I would no longer be a victim. Even in my old age I could stand tall, and I could do what I had never been able to do before. The courtroom. The day of the trial arrived, and I was ready. Sonia had prepared me for every question, every detail. When we arrived at the courthouse, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. But this wasn't fear. It wasn't simply the fear of facing the moment of truth. This was inner confidence. I sat in the courtroom while the judge called the proceedings to order. Reggie sat across from me, his eyes avoiding mine, as though he already knew this wasn't going to end the way he thought it would. He was in a cheap suit, looking down at his shoes, head bowed, silent. He didn't even acknowledge me, but I knew. He understood. This wasn't just a legal case. This was the trial of our history. The judge listened intently as we presented our evidence. He paid close attention to every forged signature, every suspicious transaction made through my accounts. And when Sonia presented the evidence showing that Reggie had created a fake business using my name and had even applied for loans and business accounts with my personal details, I saw his face change. He wasn't so sure of himself anymore. He started to fidget, his confidence slipping. That was the first sign. After hearing everything, the judge turned to Reggie. His voice was cold and firm. Do you understand that your actions amount to financial fraud, forgery, and exploitation of your own mother? Reggie sighed heavily. His answer came in a soft voice, but I knew. His response wasn't going to change what had already been done. The first moments after the verdict, the judge rendered his decision. Reggie was found guilty of fraud and financial exploitation. The court ordered him to pay full restitution for the money he had stolen, plus fines for the forgery of documents. The payment term was set for 10 years. This was a ruling that would change everything. The judge also added that if Reggie failed to meet the terms, he would face criminal charges. I sat there watching him and felt my anger slowly turn into calm. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't elated. I didn't care about his punishment. I didn't wish him harm. I just wanted justice. And that was exactly what I had gotten. Reggie didn't lift his eyes. He sat quietly, drained. This was his defeat. He couldn't speak. I, however, could feel the weight lift from my chest. For the first time in all these years I felt free. The decision has been made. When I left the courtroom, I didn't feel joy or triumph. I just felt calm, a peace I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I could breathe for the first time. I hadn't been accustomed to fighting for my dignity, but I didn't regret doing it. Reggie thought he could do whatever he wanted with me. He thought he could take my money and leave me alone. But in the end, he had learned a lesson that I wouldn't wish on anyone. I had done what I believed was right, and now my focus shifted to a new goal, taking care of myself, my life, and my future. Now I could move forward without looking back. And that was the most valuable thing of all. I walked out of the courthouse with my head held high. Justice had been restored. The weeks following the trial passed quickly. All those moments when I sat in the courtroom, listening as my son faced the consequences of his actions, were now behind me, but they were far from forgotten. I walked out of that process not just with a victory, but with a deep sense of peace. What once seemed like the most painful and terrifying experience of my life had now become part of the past, something I could leave behind. The court's decision gave me more than just money, more than just compensation for the years spent and all the heartache. It gave me something far more important, my freedom. And though it didn't instantly change everything that had happened, I felt that I was no longer the same woman who simply waited and endured. I had become someone else, stronger even if I remained in my years. A new understanding. Starting this new life wasn't easy. The money I had regained was significant, but it also served as a constant reminder of what I had lost over the years when I allowed myself to be used. Now, though, I hadn't just restored my finances. I had restored my dignity. Every time I opened my bank account and saw those same figures reflecting my restitution, I felt an incredible sense of relief. They weren't just numbers. They were a symbol of my rebirth. I had managed to take back what had been stolen, and with that I found myself again. After I received the restitution, I decided to spend part of it on making my home more comfortable, the way I had always wanted it. The old furniture that reminded me of times when I still believed my son needed my care gradually started to change. I bought a new rug, new curtains, a shelf for my books. Small things, but they made my home warm and cozy, a place where I no longer felt forgotten. But the most important part of my recovery was what I decided to do with the rest of the money. I began to invest in helping others. I created a fund to support women who had fallen victim to financial abuse in their families. I decided that a portion of what I had regained would go to helping those in similar situations to mine. This became my new life's mission, to help others avoid the traps I had fallen into. It wasn't just an act of kindness. It was my way of making the world a little bit better and safer for women who had no voice. Justice without revenge. Reggie never called, and that was exactly what I had expected. He could have tried to apologize, but I had already realized that his apologies meant nothing to me. Now I understood. It wasn't just about money. It was about finally getting what I deserved from him. Respect, even if it came at the cost of his defeat. Every time I felt that peace and satisfaction from the changes in my life, I knew it had all been worth it. But none of this meant I didn't understand the pain this story had brought. I didn't need any more tears, any more excuses, or any more attempts to forgive him for everything. My fight had been for more than just revenge. I had restored my independence, and it was at that moment that I realized I could live life on my own terms. New life, new connections. Over time, I began to spend more time with people I had once neglected. Sonia, of course, remained my trusted support, but new friendships helped me see just how many opportunities the world still had to offer, even when it seemed like I was at rock bottom. I joined several local organizations where I helped other elderly women, sharing my story and teaching them how to protect their finances and rights. This became my way of giving back to those who, like me, needed support. My story was far from simple, but I no longer allowed its dramatic moments to define me. I wasn't the same woman who waited for help and lived in the shadows. I was active, resolute, and most importantly, I was ready to be an example of how anyone could survive betrayal and stand up after life knocks them down. A true victory. My victory wasn't that I had gotten my money back. It was that I had gotten myself back. And now, when I looked at the life I had rebuilt, I knew that everything was possible because of my resolve not to give up. I wasn't the fragile old woman I used to be. I had regained my strength, not just financially but in every part of myself that had once been stripped away. The man I had once raised to love me, to respect me, had taken that for granted. He'd tried to make me disappear, to make me nothing more than a vessel for his own greed. But he had failed. Not only did I return stronger, but I came back with a purpose, to show other women they could stand up too. I had restored my life and found new meaning in helping others. And now I stood on my porch in the evenings, sipping tea, knowing that no matter how life might try to challenge me, I could face it with the same determination I had faced Reggie. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. The world could throw whatever it wanted at me, but I would stand firm. I had fought for my dignity and won. Weeks passed after the trial, and I spent my days at home, sometimes with my head buried in books, other times in the silence that had become my new companion. I wasn't waiting for Reggie to call me back or show up with tearful apologies. I realized that the court decision, while important, had already drawn the line. Reggie no longer had any power over my life, and even if his apology were laid out before me, I no longer needed it. I had allowed myself to break free from the trap he and I had placed myself in. But what I had gone through didn't vanish without leaving a mark. I was ready to continue living, but I had a sense that I was standing on the threshold of something new. My life had changed and I could feel it. I could no longer be the same woman I had been. For many years, I had been consumed by others' problems, their needs, never leaving time for myself. Now I felt that it was time to change direction. I decided that the best thing I could do after everything I had endured was to give myself a chance to start over, but without fear and regret. Instead of holding on to past grudges and pains, I decided to find new possibilities. My battle hadn't just been for money, or for the return of justice. It had been about reclaiming my inner peace and strength. I no longer had to live in fear of being betrayed again because now I knew that real power lay within me. Taking the first step toward change. I began with something small. I signed up for painting classes. I had always enjoyed painting but never had the time for it due to the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Now I had the time. I started painting and it brought me more joy than I could have imagined. Painting became not just a hobby but a healing process. Each brushstroke lifted me further away from the past, giving me space to clear my mind and feel alive again. As time passed, I realized that it wasn't just about painting. It was a symbol of my transformation. I started looking for ways to help other women who had been through similar experiences. I reached out to local organizations where I could volunteer as a consultant, sharing my experience and helping those caught in the same trap I had been in. I saw how other women, hearing my story, started to believe in themselves, becoming more confident. New encounters and new connections. I began to spend more time with people I hadn't paid much attention to before. Sonia, of course, remained my rock, but new friendships helped me realize just how many opportunities the world still had to offer, even when it seemed like I had reached my lowest point. I joined different local groups where I helped older women, shared my experiences, and taught them how to protect their finances and rights. This became my way of giving back to those who, like me, needed support. My story wasn't simple, but I no longer let its dramatic moments define me. I was no longer the woman who waited for help and stayed in the shadows. I was active, determined, and most importantly, I was ready to be an example of how anyone could survive betrayal and rise again when life knocks them down. Moments of strength. One of the greatest changes in me was emotional. I no longer lived in the past, no longer scrutinized every move Reggie made. Every time I opened my bank account and saw what he had returned to me, I realized it wasn't just about money. It was more about the fact that I had regained my freedom and self-respect. And, importantly, I didn't need his recognition. I was no longer a victim. I had started to make my own decisions and take responsibility for my life. My resolve had become my most powerful tool in seeking new opportunities. Losing in court had become my greatest win. I had learned to let go. I didn't hold anger toward him. I didn't even try to forgive him. I simply no longer allowed his presence to affect me. And that was my victory. Path to the future. It seemed like there would be no end to my story, but I decided to make it not the final tragedy, but the beginning of something new. I helped others. I began to speak about my experiences. Having emerged from pain, I helped those who were also experiencing it. I no longer sought compensation. I sought to help those in need. This became an important direction for my life. Life doesn't always hand us opportunities, but I had learned how to use them. I was ready for change, confident that it would lead me to the best life I could have. My battle wasn't just for compensation. It was for the right to be myself, for the right to start a new chapter. And I was ready to give myself that chance.
Thanks for watching. Bye bye.